They called her the Ghost Duchess. 7 years invisible. 7 years silent. 7 years enduring a marriage colder than the stone halls she wandered alone. But tonight, at the Blackmore Estate's glittering masquerade, Clara Whitmore would do what no one expected. She would fight back. The woman who destroyed her husband's heart had returned, dripping in diamonds and vengeance, ready to reclaim what she abandoned. Society watched, hungry for blood. Adrian stood frozen between his past and his hollow present. And Clara? She was done being forgotten. If you want to see how a woman everyone underestimated became the most dangerous player in the game, stay until the end, hit that like button, and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Blackmore Manor like an unwelcome guest, pale, cold, and indifferent. Clara Whitmore stood in the east drawing room, her fingers tracing the spine of a leather-bound book she had no intention of reading. Outside, the manicured garden stretched toward the horizon, perfectly maintained and utterly lifeless. Just like her marriage. 7 years. 2,555 days of existing in a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. The servants moved through the halls with practiced silence, their eyes sliding past her as if she were merely another piece of furniture, expensive, decorative, and easily forgotten. Clara had learned not to expect acknowledgement, not from the staff, not from the society matrons who smiled with surgical precision at gatherings, and certainly not from her husband. Duke Adrian Blackmore. Even his name carried weight in every room he entered. Tall, severe, with features carved from the same unforgiving stone as his ancestral estate, Adrian moved through life with the cold efficiency of a man who had locked his heart away years ago and swallowed the key. Their wedding had been a spectacle, the social event of the season. Two powerful families united, fortunes merged, futures secured. Clara had worn a dress that cost more than some estates, smiled for portraits that now hung in gilded frames throughout the manor, and spoken vows that meant everything to the witnesses and nothing to the man standing beside her. She remembered the way Adrian had looked at her that day, or rather the way he had looked through her. His eyes, a startling gray that could have been beautiful if they held any warmth, had been focused somewhere beyond her shoulder, seeing someone who wasn't there, someone who had left him shattered. Isabella Thornwood. The name was never spoken aloud in Blackmore Manor, but it hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. The woman who had captured Adrian's heart, accepted his proposal, and then vanished 3 days before their wedding with half his fortune and the reputation of being the most cunning social climber London had ever produced. That had been 8 years ago. Clara had been the solution, a strategic marriage arranged by their families to restore the Blackmore name, to prove that Adrian had moved on, to silence the whispers that followed him through every ballroom and gentleman's club. She had been 19, educated, appropriate, and naive enough to believe that kindness and patience might eventually thaw the ice between them. She had been wrong. "Your Grace?" Clara turned to find Mrs. Hartley, the head housekeeper, standing in the doorway with the rigid posture of someone delivering unpleasant news. "Yes?" "His Grace requests your presence in his study. There is a matter requiring discussion." The phrasing made Clara's stomach tighten. Adrian never requested her presence. In 7 years, they had perfected the art of occupying the same house while living entirely separate lives. He managed the estate, attended Parliament, conducted business with cold precision. She managed the household, performed her social duties, and filled her days with charitable work that no one acknowledged. They dined together twice a week, silent affairs where the click of silverware against china was the only conversation. They attended necessary social functions as a unit, presenting the perfect image of ducal harmony. Behind closed doors, they were strangers who happened to share a surname. "When?" Clara asked, setting down the unread book. "Immediately, Your Grace." Clara smoothed her dress, a deep burgundy day gown that was elegant, expensive, and would go entirely unnoticed by her husband, and followed Mrs. Hartley through the winding corridors of Blackmore Manor. The study was on the second floor, facing west, filled with dark wood and darker memories. Adrian stood behind his desk, his back to the door, staring out the window at something only he could see. He didn't turn when she entered. "You asked to see me?" Clara kept her voice neutral, a skill she had perfected over years of being neither wanted nor dismissed. There's going to be a gathering, Adrian said, his voice carrying the same emotional inflection as a weather report. 3 weeks from now, the Ashford Masquerade Ball. We will attend. Clara waited. There had to be more. Adrian didn't summon her to discuss social calendars. He finally turned, and for a moment, just a fleeting, dangerous moment, she saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade. Uncertainty. Perhaps even fear. Isabella Thornwood has returned to London. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Clara felt her breath catch, though she fought to keep her expression neutral. I see, she managed. She's married now, to Lord Edmund Rothschild. He died 6 months ago, made his fortune in shipping and railroads, left her everything. Adrian's jaw tightened. She's one of the wealthiest women in England now. And she's returned. Clara filled in the obvious conclusion. She's purchased the Ashford estate. She's hosting the masquerade. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. Every prominent family will attend. Declining the invitation would create speculation. We cannot afford more scandal. There it was, the real reason for this conversation. Not consideration for Clara's feelings, not a discussion of how they might handle this as a united front. Simply a command masked as information. Of course, Clara said quietly. We'll attend. Adrian's eyes finally focused on her, really focused, for perhaps the first time in months. She saw him taking in her composed expression, her steady hands, her complete lack of visible reaction to news that should have devastated any wife. But Clara had learned long ago that she wasn't really a wife. She was a title, a position, a social necessity. The actual woman beneath it all? Adrian had never bothered to look. That will be all, he said, dismissing her as if she were staff. Clara turned to leave, her spine straight and her head high. Another skill perfected through years of practice. Clara. She stopped, her hand on the door handle. He had used her name. He never used her name. This changes nothing between us. She didn't turn around, didn't let him see the flicker of something sharp and painful that crossed her face. Of course not, Your Grace. Nothing ever does. The next 3 weeks passed in a fog of preparation that felt more like preparing for war than a social event. The entire household buzzed with tension. Servants whispered in corners. Invitation responses were analyzed like military intelligence. The dressmaker came and went, creating a gown for Clara that she knew Adrian would never notice. But society noticed. Society always noticed. Have you heard? Isabella Thornwood is back. Rothschild, darling. Lady Rothschild now. How deliciously scandalous. Do you think the Duke will... And his poor wife, can you imagine? The whispers followed Clara through every tea party, every charity luncheon, every suffocating social obligation. The matrons of London high society watched her with predatory interest, waiting to see how the ghost Duchess would handle being haunted by a very real woman. Clara smiled, nodded, said all the appropriate things. And at night, alone in her chambers, because of course she and Adrian maintained separate bedrooms, she stared at her reflection and wondered who she had become. Not the hopeful 19-year-old who had believed love might grow from duty, not the passionate woman she might have been if anyone had ever bothered to see her. Something else. Something harder. Something that was learning, very slowly, that silence and endurance might not be strengths at all, but rather chains she had forged herself. A week before the masquerade, Clara received an unexpected visitor. She was in the conservatory, her favorite room in the entire manor, filled with light and life that the rest of the house lacked, when Mrs. Hartley announced a caller. A Miss Eliza Brennan, Your Grace. She insists it's urgent and will only speak with you personally. Clara frowned. The name was unfamiliar, but something in Mrs. Hartley's expression suggested this wasn't a routine social call. Show her in. The woman who entered was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple style and clothes that spoke of modest means but careful maintenance. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling. Your Grace, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for seeing me. I know I have no right to come here unannounced, but I didn't know where else to turn. Clara gestured to a chair, her instincts sharpening. Sit. Tell me what's troubling you. Eliza perched on the edge of the seat, as if ready to flee at any moment. I was I was employed by Lady Rothschild, Isabella Rothschild, before she married Lord Edmund. Clara's full attention focused on the young woman. Go on. I was her lady's maid for 3 years. I traveled with her, dressed her, heard things. Eliza's voice cracked. I know what she did. To Lord Edmund. To the others before him. Others? Eliza reached into her bag with shaking hands and pulled out a leather journal, small, worn, clearly well used. She kept records, not of everything, but enough. There were 3 men before Lord Edmund, all wealthy, all alone, all dead within a year of marrying her. The conservatory suddenly felt colder. Clara leaned forward. That's a serious accusation. I know. Tears streamed down Eliza's face. I know how it sounds, but I was there. I saw the small doses she added to his evening tea. I watched him grow weaker. The doctors said heart failure, but he was healthy before the wedding. They all were. Why are you telling me this? Eliza looked up, her eyes meeting Clara's with desperate intensity. Because I know why she's returned to London. She told me before she dismissed me. She said the greatest prize she ever lost was Duke Blackmore. She said she was young and foolish then, didn't understand how to play the long game. But now, Eliza's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. Now she knows exactly what she's doing. Clara felt ice spread through her veins. She means to go after Adrian. She means to destroy you first, Eliza corrected. She told me you were nothing, an obstacle so insignificant it would be almost boring to remove you. Once you're gone, reputation ruined, cast aside, whatever method she chooses, she'll comfort the Duke. Remind him of what they had. Become what she always intended to be, the Duchess of Blackmore. And then? Eliza clutched the journal tighter. Then she'll inherit everything, just like she did with the others. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle drip of water from the conservatory fountain, a sound that suddenly seemed ominous, marking seconds ticking away toward an unseen deadline. Clara's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that this could be a trap, a manipulation, another layer of whatever game was being played. But looking at Eliza's terrified face, at the worn journal that represented incredible risk to bring forward, Clara's gut told her something different. This was real. Why come to me? Why not the authorities? Who would believe me? Eliza laughed bitterly. A dismissed maid accusing one of the wealthiest women in England of murder? Lady Rothschild has connections, money, lawyers. I'd be destroyed, or worse. She swallowed hard. But you're a duchess. You have standing, and you're the one in her path. Clara stood, moving to the window, her mind already working through possibilities, risks, strategies. Behind her, Eliza's breathing was audible, quick, frightened, waiting. If what you say is true, Clara said slowly, then going public without absolute proof would be suicide. For both of us. I know. Isabella, Lady Rothschild, is brilliant. You don't survive what she's survived, don't accumulate what she's accumulated without being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. I know. Clara turned, and for the first time in 7 years, she felt something shift inside herself. Not hope. Hope was too soft, too vulnerable. Something sharper. Something dangerous. Purpose. Then we'll have to be 11 steps ahead. Eliza's eyes widened. You believe me? I don't know yet, Clara answered honestly, but I'm going to find out. And if you're telling the truth... She moved back to her chair, sitting down with the posture of someone making a declaration rather than a suggestion. If you're telling the truth, then Isabella Thornwood, Lady Rothschild, is about to discover that the woman she dismissed as insignificant is the biggest mistake she ever made. For the first time since entering, Eliza's expression shifted from fear to something else. Hope, or perhaps recognition, the kind that passed between 2 women who understood what it meant to be underestimated. What do you need me to do? Eliza asked. First, tell me everything. Every detail you remember, every pattern you noticed, every moment that seems strange. Then, Clara paused, calculating risks against potential gains, weighing 7 years of silence against the possibility of finally taking action. Then we're going to need more than suspicions and a diary. We're going to need evidence that can't be dismissed or buried. Evidence that will force even the most powerful people to listen. The masquerade, Eliza breathed. She'll make her move at the masquerade. I heard her discussing it with her solicitor, something about public perception, about positioning herself in society before approaching the Duke directly. Clara nodded slowly. Then we have 6 days. 6 days to do what? Clara picked up the journal Eliza had brought, feeling the weight of it. Not just the physical object, but everything it represented. Choices, consequences, the end of 7 years of invisibility. 6 days to become someone Isabella Rothschild never anticipated facing, Clara said. Someone who fights back. That night, for the first time in their marriage, Clara requested a private audience with Adrian. He looked surprised when she entered his study, this time by invitation rather than command. He was working late, as always, papers spread across his desk in the methodical organization that characterized everything he did. Clara? He glanced up, confusion flickering across his features. Is something wrong? I want to propose something, she said, closing the door behind her, and I need you to listen before you respond. Adrian set down his pen, giving her his full attention in a way that felt both unfamiliar and oddly intimate. I'm listening. Isabella's return isn't just about attending social functions and reestablishing herself in society. I'm aware she likely has. She means to have you, Clara interrupted, and the bluntness of it clearly startled him. Not in some romantic, nostalgic sense. She means to destroy me, insert herself back into your life, and eventually become your wife. Your real wife. Adrian's expression hardened. That's impossible. We're married. Marriages can be annulled. Reputations can be destroyed. Convenient accidents can happen. Clara moved closer to his desk, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. I know you don't love me. I've known that since the day we married. But we are married, Adrian. Legally, socially, financially, our lives are bound together. And if Isabella succeeds in her plans, it won't just be me who suffers. What are you suggesting? Clara took a breath, about to propose something that would either save them both or accelerate her own destruction. I'm suggesting we stop pretending. For 7 years, we've maintained this cold distance, this false civility that fools no one. We're strangers who share a house and a name. That makes us vulnerable, separate, easy to divide. And the alternative? We become a united front, not a loving couple. I'm not delusional enough to suggest that's possible. But partners, allies, 2 people working together against a common threat. Clara locked eyes with him, refusing to look away. Isabella is counting on our weakness, on my insignificance and your indifference. We prove her wrong. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity she wasn't accustomed to. Why now? Why, after 7 years of accepting things as they are, do you suddenly want to fight? Because I'm tired, Clara said simply. Tired of being invisible, tired of being the ghost Duchess, tired of watching my life slip away while I wait for something that's never going to happen. She paused. And because someone came to me today with information about Isabella. Information that, if true, makes her more than just a threat to our marriage. It makes her dangerous. What kind of information? Clara hesitated, then decided that if she was going to do this, really do this, she needed to trust him with the truth. The kind that suggests Lord Edmund Rothschild's death wasn't natural, and that he wasn't the first. The silence that followed was electric. Adrian's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, shock, calculation, and finally something that looked almost like respect. You have proof? Working on it. But Adrian, if I'm right, if we're right, then this isn't just about protecting our marriage or our reputations. This is about stopping someone who has killed before and will kill again. Adrian stood, moving around his desk until he was standing directly in front of her. This close, Clara could see details she usually avoided noticing: the small scar near his left eyebrow, the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, the tension in his jaw that never quite relaxed. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then involving yourself puts you in direct danger. I'm already in danger, Clara countered. The difference is, now I'm choosing to face it instead of waiting for it to destroy me quietly. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. perhaps the first genuine recognition he had ever given her. "What do you need from me?" "Trust," Clara said immediately. "At least enough to work together. At least enough to present a unified front at the masquerade. If Isabella is going to make her move, it will be there, in front of everyone who matters. We need to be ready." Adrian nodded slowly. "And after? If we survive this?" "I don't know," Clara admitted. "Maybe we renegotiate whatever this is between us. Maybe we finally have an honest conversation about what we both want. But first, we survive." Adrian extended his hand, a gesture that felt weighted with significance beyond the physical act. "Partners, then. At least for now." Clara took his hand. His grip was firm, his palm warm against hers. For 7 years they had barely touched. Now, shaking hands like business associates sealing a deal, it felt more intimate than their wedding night ever had. "Partners," she agreed. The days before the masquerade blurred into a frenzy of careful planning. Clara met with Eliza twice more, extracting every detail about Isabella's habits, her methods, her patterns. The journal Eliza had brought contained fragments, cryptic notes about preparations and timelines and necessary steps, but nothing explicit enough to take to authorities. They would need more. Clara began researching the previous men Isabella had married. 2 had died of apparent heart failure. 1 had fallen downstairs at his country estate. All 3 had been wealthy, isolated, and conveniently without close family who might ask difficult questions. Lord Edmund Rothschild fit the pattern perfectly. "She's patient," Clara said to Adrian during one of their now regular evening meetings in his study. "She takes time to establish herself, to become trusted and beloved. Then, slowly, she removes any obstacles." "You think I'm next?" It wasn't a question. "I think you were always the goal," Clara replied. "The others were practice, refinement of her technique. But you're the Duke of Blackmore. That's not just wealth, that's power, legacy, permanent position in society. That's the ultimate prize." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I loved her once. Did you know that?" Clara had suspected, but hearing him say it aloud still sent a small, sharp pain through her chest. "Yes. I thought she loved me. I thought—" He shook his head. "When she disappeared with my money, I told myself it was simple greed, that she was a social climber who saw an opportunity and took it. It was easier than admitting I had been completely fooled." "You were young. I was blind." Adrian turned to look at her. "And then I married you, and I was so determined not to be blind again that I refused to see anything at all, including the woman right in front of me." Clara's breath caught. "Adrian, I'm not apologizing," he interrupted. "Not yet. An apology requires understanding what I'm apologizing for, and I'm not sure I fully comprehend 7 years of cruelty through indifference." He paused. "But I'm acknowledging it. That's a start. It's more than I expected." "Yes. Well," a ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "You're more than I expected, too." Before Clara could respond, a knock interrupted them. Mrs. Hartley entered, her expression troubled. "Your Grace, there's a situation. Lady Rothschild has sent a gift." "A gift?" Adrian frowned. "For Her Grace. It arrived by special courier." Clara and Adrian exchanged glances. "Bring it in," Clara said. The box was large, wrapped in expensive paper and tied with silk ribbon. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was an exquisite gown, the kind of dress that would cost more than most people earned in a year. The fabric shimmered between silver and gray. The embroidery was clearly done by hand, and the style was absolutely perfect for the upcoming masquerade. Tucked inside was a note, written in elegant script. "My dear Duchess, I've heard you're attending my little gathering. I took the liberty of ensuring you'll be properly dressed for the occasion. After all, we must maintain standards. I.R." Clara felt Adrian tense beside her. "It's a message," he said quietly. "Several messages," Clara agreed, running her fingers over the expensive fabric. "She knows I'm coming. She knows I'll feel obligated to wear it or risk insult. She's demonstrating her wealth and generosity while simultaneously making me beholden to her." Clara looked up at Adrian. "And she's telling me exactly how much she doesn't consider me a threat. Will you wear it?" Clara looked at the dress. at the clear manipulation wrapped in beautiful packaging, at the trap laid out so obviously that refusing it would be seen as petty, while accepting it would be seen as submission. Then she smiled, not the polite practice smile she had perfected over 7 years, but something sharper. "Absolutely not," she said. "I'm going to wear something that makes it very clear I don't need her charity, her approval, or her permission to exist." She looked at Adrian. "And you're going to dance with me, in front of everyone, like a husband who actually notices his wife exists." "Dance with you," Adrian repeated. "Yes, unless you've forgotten how." "I haven't forgotten." He studied her for a moment. "You're enjoying this." Clara considered denying it, then decided honesty was becoming a habit. "A little. Is that wrong?" "No," Adrian said slowly. "It's actually rather impressive. 7 years I thought you were passive, accepting, content to fade into the background. Turns out you were just waiting for something worth fighting for." "Survival is worth fighting for," Clara replied, "even if it took me 7 years to remember that." Tut! The night of the masquerade arrived with all the weight of an approaching storm. Clara dressed carefully, choosing a gown she had commissioned herself, deep midnight blue that made her skin glow, with silver embroidery that caught the light without shouting for attention. Her mask was elegant, covering the top half of her face while leaving her identity clear enough for those who knew where to look. She looked like a duchess, like someone who belonged in these spaces, like someone who mattered. When she descended the stairs, Adrian was waiting in the foyer. He had already donned his own mask, black and severe, fitting his features perfectly. But when he looked up and saw her, something flickered in his eyes that she had never seen directed at her before. Appreciation. Perhaps even admiration. "You look," he started, then stopped, as if the words were unfamiliar on his tongue. "Worth fighting for?" Clara supplied, a hint of wry humor in her voice. "I was going to say formidable, but that works too." The carriage ride to the Ashford estate, to Isabella's newly acquired territory, felt like traveling to a battlefield. Neither of them spoke much. There was no need. They both understood what was coming. A confrontation years in the making, played out on a stage designed by their enemy, in front of an audience hungry for scandal. But they were ready. Or as ready as they could be. The Ashford estate glittered like a jewel box, every window blazing with light, every garden path lined with lanterns. Carriages lined the circular drive, disgorging the cream of London society in their finest clothes and most elaborate masks. Music drifted from the open doors, along with laughter and the buzz of 100 conversations. Clara took Adrian's offered arm, their first deliberate touch in public, and she couldn't remember how long. She felt the tension in his muscles, saw the way his jaw tightened as they approached the entrance. "Remember," she murmured, "we're partners. Whatever happens in there, we face it together." "Together," Adrian agreed, and for the first time in 7 years, the word felt like it might actually mean something. They stepped through the doors into a world of golden light and careful smiles, where every greeting held calculation and every glance assessed value. And somewhere in the glittering crowd, Isabella Thornwood, Lady Rothschild, was waiting. The game was about to begin. The ballroom swallowed them whole. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen starbursts, casting fractured light across hundreds of masked faces. The orchestra played something classical and dramatic, the kind of music that made everything feel like the opening scene of a tragedy. Silk and velvet swirled across marble floors as dancers moved through practiced formations, their movements as calculated as chess pieces. Clara felt every eye turned toward them as they entered. The whispers started immediately, a ripple effect spreading through the crowd like poison through water. The Duke and Duchess Blackmore. Together, actually together. Have they ever arrived arm in arm before? She's wearing blue, not the dress Isabella sent. Bold choice, or foolish. Adrian's hand tightened imperceptibly on Clara's arm. She could feel the tension radiating from him, could sense him searching the crowd for a face he both dreaded and anticipated seeing. "Steady," Clara murmured, her lips barely moving behind her mask. "Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you rattled." "I'm not—" "You are. Your jaw does this thing when you're tense. I've had 7 years to study it." Despite everything, Adrian's mouth twitched. Observant. Invisible women see everything. It's our only advantage. They descended the grand staircase into the sea of society's elite. Lord Pemberton approached first, his massive frame difficult to disguise even behind an elaborate gold mask. Blackmore, didn't expect to see you here. Thought you might… Well. He cleared his throat awkwardly, his eyes darting between Adrian and Clara. Brave of you both. Very brave. Brave would imply we have something to fear, Clara said smoothly, her voice carrying just enough to reach the nearby listeners pretending not to eavesdrop. We're simply attending a party, Lord Pemberton. Nothing more dramatic than that. Pemberton blinked, clearly surprised to hear her speak with such directness. In 7 years of social functions, Clara had perfected the art of pleasant nothingness, smiles and nods and forgettable pleasantries. This version of her, composed and sharp, was unfamiliar territory. Yes. Well, quite right. Enjoy the evening. As he lumbered away, Adrian leaned closer. That was different. What was? You. Engaging. I don't think I've heard you speak more than 3 words at a social function in years. You've never been listening, Clara replied, then immediately regretted the sharpness of it. I'm sorry, that was… True, Adrian interrupted, and fair. Don't apologize for being right. Before Clara could respond, the crowd shifted, and there she was, Isabella Rothschild. Even masked, she was unmistakable. Tall, elegant, with dark hair swept up in an elaborate style that probably required 2 maids and an hour to achieve. Her dress was crimson, bold and unapologetic, cut to display wealth and confidence in equal measure. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, catching light with every movement. She was beautiful. Clara had known this intellectually, had seen old portraits and heard the descriptions. But seeing her in person, watching the way she moved through the crowd with the easy grace of someone who had never doubted their welcome anywhere, Clara understood something she hadn't before. Isabella wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic. The kind of woman who made everyone in her orbit feel privileged just to be noticed. And she was looking directly at Adrian. Your Grace, Isabella's voice carried across the space between them. Warm honey, with an edge of something sharper underneath. How wonderful to see you. It's been far too long. Clara felt Adrian's entire body go rigid. For a moment, she thought he might turn and leave, might retreat into the cold distance that had protected him for 8 years. But then his hand shifted on her arm, his fingers curling slightly, and she realized he was grounding himself, using her as an anchor. Lady Rothschild, Adrian said, his voice impressively neutral. Thank you for the invitation. Isabella glided closer, her eyes never leaving Adrian's face. The crowd around them had gone quiet, sensing drama the way sharks sense blood. And you must be the Duchess Blackmore. Isabella's gaze finally shifted to Clara, and the dismissal in it was so complete it was almost impressive. How lovely. I sent you a dress, didn't I? I hope it arrived safely. It did, Clara replied, matching Isabella's pleasant tone exactly. It was very generous. Unfortunately, I already had something suitable. The words landed like a slap wrapped in silk. Isabella's smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that the invisible wife had opinions and the spine to voice them. Of course. How thoughtful of you to coordinate. Isabella's attention returned to Adrian like a compass finding north. I was hoping we might have a chance to speak privately later. There are so many years to catch up on. My wife and I prefer to stay together this evening, Adrian said, and Clara felt shock ripple through both Isabella and the watching crowd. We've been apart far too much lately. Wouldn't you agree, darling? The endearment, completely unprecedented in their marriage, hung in the air like a declaration of war. Clara met his eyes and saw the question there. This was the moment. Commit to the alliance or retreat to safety. She chose alliance. Absolutely, Clara said, letting warmth seep into her voice that she didn't entirely have to fake. After all, what's the point of attending a party together if we spend it in separate corners? Isabella's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, genuine anger flashing across her features before the pleasant facade snapped back into place. How charming! True love! The words dripped with something that might have been amusement or might have been contempt. Well, I won't monopolize your time. Do enjoy the evening, both of you. She swept away, trailing admirers like a comet trailing stars. The crowd slowly returned to their conversations, but Clara could feel the weight of speculation hanging heavy in the air. That went better than expected, Adrian murmured. That was the opening move, Clara corrected. She's testing our defenses. The real attack comes later. Optimistic. Realistic. Clara scanned the ballroom, looking for Eliza. They had arranged for her to attend, using Clara's influence to secure an invitation as a companion to an elderly aunt who needed assistance. She should be here somewhere, watching, waiting for the signal. Dance with me, Adrian said suddenly. Clara looked at him in surprise. Now? You said I should dance with you like a husband who notices his wife exists, so let's do it, before I lose my nerve. There was something almost vulnerable in the admission, this man who commanded estates and sat in Parliament, admitting that dancing with his own wife required courage. Clara placed her hand in his. Try not to step on my feet. I'd like to walk out of here with dignity intact. I make no promises. They moved on to the dance floor as a waltz began. Adrian's hand settled on her waist, formal, proper, but still the most intimate touch they'd shared in years. Clara's hand rested on his shoulder, and for a moment they simply stood there, adjusting to the strangeness of proximity. Then the music swelled, and they began to move. Adrian was a good dancer, precise, controlled, exactly what one would expect from a duke raised with every social grace. Clara matched him step for step, her years of training serving her well. But there was something mechanical about it, something that felt more like a performance than a dance. You're counting, Adrian observed. So are you. Fair point. He was quiet for a moment, navigating a turn. This is strange. Dancing? Dancing with you, being close to you, actually looking at you. He met her eyes. You have gold flecks in your eyes. I never noticed that before. Clara's breath caught. Adrian, I'm not trying to seduce you, he said quickly. I'm just noticing. Things I should have noticed years ago. This isn't real, Clara reminded him, though her heart was doing complicated things in her chest. This is strategy. We're presenting a united front, nothing more. Is that what you want it to be? The question hung between them, dangerous and complicated. Clara didn't have an answer, or rather, she had too many answers, all contradictory. She was saved from responding by a commotion near the entrance. A woman's voice, raised in distress, cut through the music. Please, I need to speak with the Duchess Blackmore. It's urgent. Clara's head snapped toward the sound. Eliza stood at the entrance, held back by two footmen, her face pale and desperate. That's my signal, Clara said quietly to Adrian. Your what? Trust me. Clara pulled away from him and moved swiftly through the crowd toward Eliza, aware of every eye following her movement. Let her through, Clara commanded the footman. She's with me. The footman hesitated, clearly uncertain whether to obey a duchess or their employer's staff. Clara used the moment to reach Eliza herself. What is it? She asked, loud enough to be overheard, but quiet enough to seem private. Your Grace, you have to come. Now, I found something in Lord Rothschild's private papers. Eliza's performance was perfect, terrified, urgent, genuine. Something that changes everything. Isabella materialized beside them like a dark angel, her smile sharp enough to cut. Is there a problem? Lady Blackmore, if your companion is unwell, I can have her shown to a private room. That won't be necessary, Clara said. She's brought urgent news from the estate, a family matter. I'm afraid we'll need to take our leave. How unfortunate. And just when the evening was getting interesting. Isabella's eyes glittered behind her mask. Though I must say, it's curious that urgent family news would come through a young woman I don't recognize rather than through proper channels. Curious indeed, Clara agreed pleasantly. Almost as curious as sending anonymous gifts to near strangers. But then, we all have our little eccentricities, don't we, Lady Rothschild? The verbal parry landed. Isabella's smile froze, and for a moment, the pretense of civility stripped away entirely. Careful, Your Grace, Isabella said softly. You're playing a game you don't understand with stakes you can't afford. On the contrary, Clara replied, her voice equally soft and infinitely colder. I understand perfectly, and unlike you, I don't need to cheat to win. She turned and walked away before Isabella could respond, Eliza at her side and Adrian falling into step behind them. The crowd parted, whispers exploding in their wake. "That was reckless," Adrian said once they were in the carriage. "That was necessary," Clara corrected. She looked at Eliza. "Tell me you actually found something and this wasn't just theater." "I found something." Eliza pulled papers from her reticule with shaking hands. "I went back to the Rothschild estate. The townhouse Lady Isabella hasn't sold yet. I still have keys from when I was employed there. I thought if there was anything incriminating, it would be in Lord Edmund's private study." "And?" Adrian leaned forward. "Letters from a physician named Dr. Marcus Whitley. He was treating Lord Edmund in the months before his death." Eliza spread the papers across her lap. "Look at the dates. Look at what he prescribed." Clara took the letters, holding them up to the carriage lantern. Her medical knowledge was limited, but she could read dates and dosages. "He was treating him for heart palpitations," she said slowly, "starting 6 months before the wedding." "Lord Edmund was healthy as a horse before he met Isabella," Eliza said. "Everyone who knew him said so. He rode every morning, hunted regularly, never a day of illness in his life. Then suddenly, heart problems." Adrian's voice was grim. "Convenient." "Look at the second letter," Eliza urged. "From 3 months before his death," who Clara read aloud. "My lord, I must express concern regarding your symptoms. While the prescribed digitalis should help regulate your heart rhythm, the severity of your episode suggests either an underlying condition we have not yet identified or external factors exacerbating your condition. I would strongly recommend—" She looked up. "The letter ends there. It's torn." "I think Dr. Whitley suspected something," Eliza said. "I think he was starting to question whether Lord Edmund's illness was natural." "What happened to the doctor?" Adrian asked. Eliza's face went pale. "He died 2 months after Lord Edmund. Carriage accident on a country road." The silence in the carriage was absolute. "This is bigger than we thought," Clara said finally. "This isn't just about us or about Adrian. Isabella has killed at least 2 people, possibly more. She has resources, connections, and absolutely no moral boundaries." "So what do we do?" Eliza asked. Clara looked at Adrian, saw him already thinking through strategies, calculating risks. For the first time in their marriage, they were genuinely partners, 2 minds working toward the same goal. "We need proof that will hold up in court," Adrian said. "Letters that suggest suspicious circumstances aren't enough. We need evidence that directly links Isabella to the crimes." "The journal Eliza brought mentions preparations," Clara said, thinking aloud. "What if those preparations are still in the Rothschild townhouse? What if she kept samples, or receipts, or some record of what she used?" "We'd need to search the entire house," Eliza said, "and it would take hours, days even." "Then we create a distraction," Clara said. "Something that keeps Isabella occupied and away from the townhouse long enough for us to search it properly." "What kind of distraction?" Adrian asked. Clara met his eyes. "The kind that requires me to do something I swore I'd never do again." "Which is?" "Play the perfect Duchess. Organize a charity event. Invite every important person in London." Clara's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. "Isabella craves social acceptance and position. If I extend an olive branch, if I make it seem like I'm conceding, accepting her return to society, she won't be able to resist attending." "That's dangerous," Adrian said. "It puts you directly in her crosshairs." "I'm already in her crosshairs," Clara pointed out. "At least this way, I control the battlefield." The carriage pulled up to Blackmore Manor. As they disembarked, Adrian caught Clara's arm gently. "Earlier, when I asked what you wanted this to be," he said quietly, "you didn't answer." "I don't know," Clara admitted. "Ask me again when we're not fighting for our lives." "Deal." He released her arm but didn't step back. "Clara, what you did tonight, standing up to her, refusing to be dismissed, that took courage." "Or stupidity." "Courage," Adrian repeated firmly. "I've spent 7 years treating you like a piece of furniture. Turns out, you're the strongest person I know." Before Clara could find words to respond to that, Mrs. Hartley appeared at the door, her face grave. "Your Graces, I'm afraid there's been an incident. Someone broke into her Grace's chambers." Clara felt ice flood her veins. When? While you were at the masquerade. Nothing appears to be stolen, but Mrs. Hartley hesitated. The intruder left something. A message. They rushed inside and up to Clara's chambers. The room looked undisturbed at first glance. Bed made, furniture in place, everything as it should be. But on Clara's dressing table, arranged with deliberate care, was a single dead rose and a note written in elegant script. Some obstacles remove themselves with proper encouragement. Others require more direct intervention. Choose wisely, little Duchess. A friend. It's a threat, Eliza breathed. It's a declaration, Clara corrected, staring at the dead rose. She's telling me she can reach me anywhere, that I'm not safe even in my own home. Adrian picked up the note, his face darkening. We're increasing security, guards on every entrance, trusted staff only. No one enters or leaves without— No, Clara interrupted. No? She's trying to make me afraid, trying to make me retreat and hide. That's exactly what she wants. Clara picked up the dead rose, holding it carefully. Instead, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to throw the biggest charity gala this city has seen in years. We're going to invite everyone who matters, and we're going to make sure Isabella Rothschild feels obligated to attend and play nice. While we search her house, Adrian finished, understanding dawning. While we search her house, Clara confirmed. She's made it personal. Fine. Let's see how she handles being outmaneuvered by the woman she thought was too insignificant to matter. Eliza looked between them, something like hope flickering across her face. You really think this will work? I think we don't have a choice, Clara said. Isabella has resources we can't match, and connections we can't fight directly. But she has a weakness. Which is? Adrian asked. Clara smiled, and it was not a kind expression. She underestimates people. She always has. She underestimated Lord Edmund, thinking he wouldn't question his illness. She underestimated Dr. Whitley, thinking he wouldn't investigate. And she's underestimating me. Clara set the dead rose down with finality. That's going to be her downfall. What do you need from me? Adrian asked. Everything, Clara said simply. Your name, your connections, your complete trust. I need you to stand beside me publicly and support whatever I do, even if it seems insane, without question. That's a lot of trust to ask from a man you barely know. Yes, Claire agreed. It is. But you asked what I wanted this to be between us. Maybe this is the start of something real. Maybe it's just strategy. Either way, we're in this together now, all the way. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and Clara could see him making the same calculation she was, weighing risks against potential gains, trust against necessity. All right, he said finally. All the way. But Clara? Yes? Don't get yourself killed proving a point. Isabella's already murdered at least 2 people. She won't hesitate to make you number 3. I know. Clara moved to the window, looking out at the darkened grounds of Blackmore Manor. Somewhere out there, in the glittering heart of London, Isabella Rothschild was celebrating her successful intimidation of the insignificant Duchess. She had no idea the war had just begun. Get some rest, Claire said to Eliza. Tomorrow, we start planning. We have 2 weeks to organize an event spectacular enough to trap a murderer and search a house thoroughly enough to find evidence that's probably very well hidden. 2 weeks, Eliza repeated faintly. That's impossible. So is everything else we're trying to do, Clara pointed out. We might as well be consistently impossible. After Eliza left, Adrian lingered. You've changed, he observed. I've stopped accepting things as they are, Clara corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Adrian moved closer, studying her face in the lamplight. I'm seeing someone I don't recognize. Someone who challenges murderers and organizes elaborate stings and speaks her mind without apology. Maybe you never looked closely enough to see who was actually there. Maybe, Adrian agreed. Or maybe you've been hiding, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And you think this is that moment? Blackmail and murder and social warfare? I think necessity has a way of revealing who people really are. Adrian reached out, then stopped himself, his hand falling back to his side. For what it's worth, I prefer this version. She's terrifying, but she's real. Clara laughed despite herself. Terrifying, what every wife wants to hear. You're not really my wife, Adrian said quietly. Not in any way that matters, but you're my partner now, and partners deserve honesty. He paused. I don't know if I can ever be what you might have wanted in a husband. The damage Isabella did, the walls I built, I don't know if they can come down. I'm not asking them to, Clara said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Right now, I just need you to be what you said, my partner, someone who has my back while I have yours. That I can do. Good. Because tomorrow, I'm calling on every society contact I've cultivated over 7 years of being invisible. I'm going to cash in every favor, pull every string, and create an event so spectacular that Isabella won't be able to stay away. And while she's there, you and I will keep her distracted and visible while Eliza and a team we absolutely trust search the Rothschild townhouse from top to bottom. Clara turned back to face him fully. It's risky. It's potentially illegal. And if we're caught, it could destroy us both. Sounds like a typical Thursday, Adrian said dryly, then grew serious. I meant what I said. All the way. Whatever you need, you have it. After he left, Clara sat alone in her chambers, staring at the dead rose. A threat, yes, but also proof that Isabella was rattled enough to act impulsively. The mask of perfect control was starting to slip. Clara picked up the rose and carried it to the fireplace, tossing it into the flames. As it caught and burned, she made herself a promise. Isabella Rothschild had spent 8 years perfecting the art of being underestimated and using that advantage to destroy people. Now it was Clara's turn. The invisible Duchess was about to become the most dangerous woman in London, and Isabella would never see it coming. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Sunlight streaming through windows, birds singing in the gardens, servants moving through their routines as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis the night before. Clara stood in the morning room, surrounded by paper, ink, and the machinery of high society warfare. Guest lists, venue options, menu selections, charitable causes that would attract the right attention. Every detail mattered when you were building a trap disguised as a gala. You sent for me, Your Grace? Lady Beatrice Ashford stood in the doorway, one of the most influential women in London's society, a widow with impeccable taste and connections that ran deeper than most people's bloodlines. She was also someone Clara had quietly helped 3 years ago when Beatrice's son had gotten into gambling trouble that threatened the family reputation, a favor Clara had never mentioned, never leveraged, until now. Beatrice, thank you for coming. Clara gestured to a chair. I need your help with something rather ambitious. Beatrice sat, her sharp eyes taking in the organized chaos of Clara's planning. I heard about last night. The entire city is talking about how you stood up to Isabella Rothschild. Quite the performance. It wasn't a performance. No? Beatrice's eyebrow arched. Then what was it? A declaration of war. Clara met her eyes directly. And I need allies. Something shifted in Beatrice's expression, surprise giving way to interest. The ghost Duchess finally shows her teeth. I wondered when that would happen. You knew? Darling, I've watched you for 7 years. Quiet, composed, never causing trouble, never demanding attention. But your eyes were always watching, always calculating. Beatrice leaned back. I've been waiting to see what would happen if you ever decided to stop being invisible. Clara felt something loosen in her chest, validation from an unexpected source. I'm organizing a charity gala, 2 weeks from tonight. It needs to be the event of the season, impossible to decline, with every influential family in attendance. And Isabella Rothschild will receive a personal invitation from me, a public gesture of reconciliation and welcome. Clara's smile was sharp. She won't be able to refuse without looking petty. Clever. What's the real purpose? Clara made a split-second decision. Trust or don't trust. Halfway measures wouldn't work. While Isabella is at the gala, visible and accounted for, a team will search the Rothschild townhouse for evidence linking her to her late husband's death, and possibly others. Beatrice went very still. That's a serious accusation. It's a true one. I have witness testimony, partial documentation, and a pattern of deaths that's too consistent to be coincidence. Clara pulled out the letters Eliza had found. I need proof that will stand up to legal scrutiny. And I need Isabella distracted long enough to find it. Beatrice read the letters in silence, her face growing graver with each line. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. Lord Edmund was a good man. If Isabella murdered him, she set the papers down carefully. What do you need from me? Co-host the gala. Your name attached to it makes it untouchable. Everyone will attend if you're involved. Help me create an evening so spectacular, so full of social opportunities that Isabella will have to stay the entire time or risk looking suspicious. And if we're caught, if this goes wrong, then we both face the consequences. I won't lie about the risks, Beatrice. This could destroy us. Beatrice studied her for a long moment. You've changed. When did that happen? When I realized that being safe and being invisible were the same as being dead. Clara straightened her shoulders. I've spent 7 years surviving. I'm done with that. Now I'm fighting. All right. Beatrice stood, decision made. I'm in. But Clara? If we're doing this, we do it properly. No half measures. We make this gala so brilliant, so unmissable, that refusing to attend would be social suicide. Exactly what I was thinking. Over the next 3 days, Clara became a force of nature. She called on every society contact she'd cultivated, cashed in favors she'd been quietly accumulating, and demonstrated a political savvy that shocked everyone who had dismissed her as the meek, forgettable Duchess. Lady Morrison, whose daughter Clara had helped navigate a scandal, she contributed her estate's ballroom and grounds. Lord Pemberton, whose sister Clara had supported through a difficult divorce, he agreed to sponsor the charitable cause, funding for a women's hospital. Mrs. Ashford, the banker's wife desperate for social acceptance, Clara guaranteed her prominent placement at the event in exchange for financial backing. One by one, the pieces fell into place. And with each commitment, each public show of support, Clara's position strengthened while Isabella's options narrowed. Adrian watched the transformation with something approaching awe. You're terrifying, he said one evening as Clara finalized the guest list. Absolutely terrifying. I prefer effective. That too. He sat across from her, studying the organized chaos of her planning. Half of these people wouldn't have given you the time of day a week ago. They owed me favors. They just didn't realize it because I never asked for anything in return. Clara made a notation on the seating chart. People underestimate kindness. They think it's weakness. But favors accumulate interest, and I've been collecting for 7 years. And now you're calling them all in at once. Now I'm building an army. Clara looked up. Isabella thinks she's the only one who knows how to play the long game. She's wrong. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Hartley entered, her expression troubled. Your Grace, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says his name is Dr. Marcus Whitley. Clara's pen froze mid-stroke. She exchanged a sharp glance with Adrian. Dr. Whitley is dead, Clara said carefully. Carriage accident 2 months ago. That's what I told him, Your Grace. He said to tell you that reports of his death were strategically arranged. Clara stood slowly. Show him in. Adrian, stay. The man who entered was middle-aged, with graying hair and the kind of exhausted face that comes from extended fear. He carried a leather medical bag and moved with the cautious wariness of someone expecting attack. Dr. Whitley, Clara said, you're supposed to be dead. Yes, well, that was rather the point. He glanced at Adrian. Your Grace, thank you for seeing me. I know how this must look. It looks like a trap, Adrian said bluntly. Explain quickly why I shouldn't have you thrown out. Because I have information about Isabella Rothschild that could save your lives. Whitley set his bag on the table. I was Lord Edmund's physician. I treated him in the months before his death, and I began to suspect that his illness wasn't natural. We know, Clara said. We found your letters. Whitley's eyes widened. How did you... He shook his head. Never mind. If you found the letters, then you know I was questioning his symptoms. What you don't know is what I discovered when I finally worked up the courage to run additional tests without his knowledge. He opened his medical bag and pulled out a journal, different from Eliza's, thicker, filled with medical notations and charts. I tested samples of his food, his medicine, his tea, everything he consumed regularly. Whitley's hands shook slightly. I found digitalis, not in therapeutic doses, but in quantities carefully calibrated to mimic heart disease while slowly poisoning him. Can you prove it? Adrian demanded. I kept the samples. I documented everything. Whitley pulled out sealed vials and labeled containers. But before I could go to the authorities, I received a visitor, a very well-dressed man who explained that accidents happen to curious physicians, that my family, my wife, my children, could easily disappear if I didn't. So you faked your death, Clara said. I arranged an accident, a body that couldn't be easily identified, and I've been in hiding ever since, trying to figure out what to do with this information. He looked between them. Then I heard about you, about the ghost Duchess who stood up to Isabella Rothschild, about the Duke who's finally defending his wife. And I thought, maybe you're the people who can actually stop her. Clara's mind raced through implications. If you come forward, you put yourself and your family in danger. We're already in danger. As long as Isabella is free, as long as she has power and resources, we'll never be safe. Whitley's jaw set. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of letting a murderer walk free because she has money and connections. If you're planning something, if you're actually trying to bring her down, then I want to help. Adrian stood and began pacing, his strategic mind clearly working through angles. Your testimony alone won't be enough. She'll discredit you, claim you're a disgraced physician with a grudge. Which is why we need physical evidence from her own hand, Clara said. Documentation, receipts, something that directly links her to obtaining the poison, something she couldn't explain away. The townhouse search, Whitley said. You know about that? I've been watching you both, trying to determine if you were genuine or if this was another of Isabella's manipulations. He managed a tired smile. Apparently I'm not the only one who knows how to gather intelligence. The gala is in 11 days, Clara said. Can you stay hidden that long? I've managed 6 months. 11 more days won't matter. After Whitley left, with promises to stay in contact and remain out of sight, Clara and Adrian sat in heavy silence. This is bigger than we thought, Adrian finally said. Yes. If we fail, she'll kill all of us. Whitley, Eliza, you, me, anyone who knows the truth. Yes. And you still want to do this? Clara looked at him directly. I spent 7 years being afraid of shadows and silence. I'm not afraid anymore. Or rather, she corrected herself with brutal honesty. I am afraid. I'm terrified. But I'm more afraid of what happens if we do nothing. Adrian crossed to her, and for the first time in their marriage, he took both her hands in his. Not formally, not strategically, but with genuine warmth. Then we see this through, he said, together. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning it had never carried before. Together, Clara agreed. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Invitations went out on thick cream paper with elegant calligraphy, impossible to refuse without insult. Responses came back positive, almost universally. The Morrison estate was transformed into something magnificent, gardens strung with lights, ballroom decorated in silver and white, entertainment arranged that would keep guests engaged for hours. And throughout it all, Clara played her role perfectly. The gracious hostess, the charitable Duchess, the woman extending an olive branch to her husband's former love. The invitation to Isabella was hand-delivered by Clara herself. She arrived at the Rothschild townhouse on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing her most impressive day dress and carrying the invitation like a peace offering. Isabella received her in a drawing room that reeked of new money, trying to look like old wealth. Everything was expensive, exquisite, and somehow wrong, like a stage set designed by someone who had studied aristocracy but never actually lived it. Duchess Blackmore. Isabella's smile was poisonous honey. What an unexpected pleasure. Lady Rothschild. Clara sat without being invited, a power move that made Isabella's eyes narrow fractionally. I wanted to deliver this personally. She handed over the invitation. Isabella read it, her expression cycling through surprise, suspicion, and calculation. A charity gala. How, noble of you. She set it aside. And you want me to attend? I think we got off on the wrong foot, Clara said, each word carefully chosen. Your history with my husband is exactly that. History. We're both intelligent women. Surely we can coexist in the same social circles without drama. How very mature of you. I thought so. Clara stood, preparing to leave. The gala is 11 days from now. I do hope you'll attend. It would mean a great deal to the hospital fund, and to me personally. She was at the door when Isabella spoke. You're planning something. Clara turned back, her expression perfectly innocent. I'm planning a charity event. Nothing more sinister than that. You've changed, Isabella observed, standing and moving closer with predatory grace. A week ago, you were the invisible wife who barely spoke. Now you're organizing events and making social power plays. What happened? You happened, Clara said simply. You came back and reminded me that I have a choice. I can keep being invisible, or I can fight for what's mine. And what exactly is yours? My marriage, my position, my life. Clara met Isabella's eyes without flinching. I know you think I'm weak, that I'm easy to remove, but I'm the Duchess of Blackmore, and I've spent 7 years learning how this world works. You may have money, Isabella, but I have something you'll never have. Legitimacy. The words hit their target. Isabella's composure cracked just slightly, fury flashing across her face before she controlled it. Enjoy your gala, Duchess, Isabella said softly. I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Wonderful. I look forward to it. Clara left before her hands could start shaking, before the fear she was suppressing could show on her face. She made it to her carriage, made it halfway back to Blackmore Manor, before Adrian, who had been waiting hidden nearby, joined her. How did it go? He asked. She's coming, and she's furious. Clara let out a shaky breath. I pushed her, hard, maybe too hard, or exactly hard enough. Adrian's hand found hers. She's off balance, angry. People make mistakes when they're angry. Or they become more dangerous. That too. The gala arrived like an approaching storm. Clara dressed in silver, not white, which would have been too bridal, and not dark, which would have suggested mourning or defeat. Silver, like armor, like starlight, like steel. Adrian appeared at her door as she was making final adjustments. You look... He stopped, searching for words. Terrified? Clara suggested. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. He offered his arm. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The Morrison estate glittered like something from a fairy tale. Every window blazed with light, the gardens sparkled with lanterns, music drifted through the air like something magical. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging London's elite in their finest clothes. And somewhere in that glittering crowd, Isabella Rothschild waited. Clara and Adrian greeted guests at the entrance, a united front that drew whispers and speculation. The ghost Duchess and the cold Duke, suddenly playing the role of devoted couple. Society noticed. Society always noticed. Your Grace, what a lovely event. Duchess, so generous of you to include everyone. Your Grace, you look radiant. The compliments washed over Clara like waves, and she smiled and thanked and played her role perfectly. But her eyes constantly scanned the crowd, searching for the one face that mattered. Beatrice appeared at her elbow. She just arrived, east entrance, wearing emerald green. Thank you. Clara turned to Adrian. It's time. The team is ready. Eliza has the keys. Whitley is standing by with his evidence. Adrian's grip on her hand tightened briefly. Once this starts, there's no stopping it. Good. I'm done stopping. They moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and deflecting questions, until they reached the center of the ballroom. Isabella stood near the orchestra, surrounded by admirers, looking like a queen holding court. She saw Clara coming and smiled. Duchess Blackmore, what a wonderful party. I'm so glad you could attend, Lady Rothschild. Clara signaled the orchestra leader. In fact, I was hoping you might help me with something. Oh? I'm making an announcement about the hospital fund, and I thought, since you're so recently returned to London, it might be a wonderful opportunity for you to publicly demonstrate your charitable nature. Clara's smile was pure innocence. Would you join me on the stage? Isabella's eyes narrowed, searching for the trap. But refusing would look churlish in front of hundreds of witnesses. She was boxed in. Of course, I'd be delighted. They climbed to the small stage together. The orchestra fell silent. The crowd turned, sensing drama. Clara took the microphone, her voice carrying clear and strong across the ballroom. Thank you all for coming tonight. Your support for the Women's Hospital Fund means more than you know. But before we continue celebrating, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge someone special. She turned to Isabella. Lady Rothschild has recently returned to London after several years abroad. Many of you remember her from before. Tonight, I wanted to publicly welcome her back and invite her to join our charitable efforts. The crowd applauded politely. Isabella's smile was frozen on her face. Thank you, Duchess, she said through clenched teeth. How very gracious. We're all friends here, Clara said warmly. After all, the past is the past, isn't it? No reason we can't move forward with civility and mutual respect. She handed the microphone to Isabella, forcing her to speak, forcing her to be visible and accounted for. Every second Isabella spent on this stage was another second Eliza's team had to search the townhouse. Isabella took the microphone, her composure visibly strained. The Duchess is too kind. I'm honored to be welcomed so warmly into London society once again. Perhaps you could tell us about your late husband's charitable work, Clara suggested innocently. Lord Edmund was known for his generosity. I'm sure people would love to hear about the causes he supported. It was a calculated risk, pushing Isabella to talk about the man she had murdered. Clara watched her face carefully, saw the flash of fury before Isabella controlled it. Edmund was indeed generous, Isabella said tightly. He supported many causes before his untimely death. Heart failure, wasn't it? Clara's voice was sympathetic, but her eyes were steel. Such a tragedy, and so unexpected for a man so young and healthy. The crowd murmured, some uncomfortable, others intrigued. Isabella's hand clenched on the microphone. Yes, very unexpected. And you've had such terrible luck with illness, Clara continued, her voice still sweet as honey. Wasn't there another gentleman? Before Lord Edmund? Lord Hastings, I believe? Also heart failure. The murmurs grew louder. People were starting to notice the pattern. Duchess, Isabella said, her voice low and dangerous. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue. And Lord Pemberton's cousin, Lord Richard, fell down the stairs at his country estate. You were staying there at the time, weren't you? Isabella's composure shattered. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Clara said calmly. I'm simply noting an unfortunate pattern. 3 wealthy men, all dead within a year of your involvement, all leaving their fortunes to you. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the stage, on the 2 women facing each other like duelists. You have no proof, Isabella hissed. You have nothing but baseless accusations and jealous speculation. Actually, a new voice said from the back of the ballroom, she has quite a bit more than that. Dr. Whitley stepped forward, holding his medical bag. Behind him, Eliza appeared with an armful of documents, and behind her 2 constables in official uniform. Isabella's face went white. What is this? This, Clara said clearly, is justice, Doctor. Whitley, would you care to explain your findings? Whitley climbed onto the stage, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing. I was Lord Edmund Rothschild's physician. I documented systematic poisoning over a period of 6 months. I have medical records, test results, and physical samples proving that he was deliberately killed. And I, Eliza said, mounting the stage with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose, found these in the Rothschild townhouse tonight. She held up ledgers, receipts, and a journal. Detailed records of purchases, arsenic, digitalis, various other compounds, all bought under false names, all corresponding exactly to the timeline of Lord Edmund's illness. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Isabella backed away, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. This is a setup, she said desperately. They're lying. They've fabricated everything. We have 3 witnesses, Clara said. Medical documentation, physical evidence, and something else. She pulled out a final document, Lord Edmund's will, obtained through Whitley's contacts. Lord Edmund changed his will 3 days before he died, left everything to charity, not to you. But the change was never filed because he died before it could be made official. He knew, Adrian said, stepping forward to stand beside Clara. Lord Edmund figured out what you were doing. He tried to protect himself, but you killed him before he could. Isabella's eyes darted around the ballroom, searching for an escape route. Every exit was blocked by fascinated aristocrats. The constables moved closer. "You're the ghost Duchess," Isabella snarled at Clara. "You're nobody. You don't have the courage or the intelligence to do this." "You're right," Clara said calmly. "I was nobody. I was invisible. And you know what I learned while being invisible? I learned to watch, to listen, to understand exactly how this world works and who owes whom favors." She stepped closer. "You underestimated me because I was quiet, because I didn't demand attention. You thought silence meant weakness. But silence," Adrian added, his voice cold, "can also mean patience, strategy, and Clara has 7 years of both." "Officers," Clara said to the constables, "I believe you have enough evidence to make an arrest?" "More than enough, Your Grace." They moved toward Isabella. She tried to run. It was instinct more than strategy, a desperate bolt toward the nearest exit, but the crowd didn't part. For the first time in her life, society didn't give Isabella Thornwood what she wanted. She made it 3 steps before the constables caught her. "You can't do this!" Isabella screamed as they restrained her. "I have money. I have connections. I'll destroy all of you." "No," Clara said quietly, but in the absolute silence of the ballroom, everyone heard her. "You're done destroying people. Tonight you face consequences for the first time in your life." As the constables led Isabella away, still screaming threats and promises of vengeance, the ballroom remained frozen in shocked silence. Then someone started clapping. It was Beatrice, then Lady Morrison, then Lord Pemberton. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted in applause. Clara stood on the stage, Adrian at her side, and felt the weight of 7 years of invisibility finally lift. She had fought, she had won, and she had done it by being exactly what Isabella thought was impossible. Stronger than silence, smarter than invisibility, and more dangerous than anyone had ever suspected. But as the applause continued and society celebrated her victory, Clara saw something that made her blood run cold. One of the constables, the one holding Isabella's left arm, caught her eye and winked. Isabella's screaming had stopped. Her face had gone eerily calm, and Clara realized with horrifying clarity that this wasn't over, not even close. The wink happened so fast that Clara almost convinced herself she'd imagined it, but the sick feeling in her stomach told her otherwise. She watched the constables escort Isabella through the crowd, watched the way the second officer's hand rested too casually on his weapon, watched the subtle nod Isabella gave as they reached the door. "Adrian," Clara said quietly, her smile never wavering even as her heart hammered. "Something's wrong." "What do you mean?" "The constable, the one on her left. I think he's—" The explosion of movement happened before she could finish. The left constable suddenly shoved his partner hard into the crowd and grabbed Isabella's arm, not restraining, but protective. In one fluid motion, he drew his weapon and aimed it at the stunned ballroom. "Nobody move!" His accent had changed, not British at all, but something Eastern European, rough and dangerous. "Or the Duchess dies first." The ballroom erupted in screams. People scattered, pressing against walls, overturning chairs in their panic. The second constable scrambled to his feet, reaching for his own weapon, but the fake officer was faster. "Don't," he warned. "I have no problem killing everyone in this room." Adrian moved to step in front of Clara, but she grabbed his arm. "Don't be stupid. He'll shoot you." "Listen to your wife," the false constable said. "Smart woman. Smarter than Isabella gave her credit for." He pulled Isabella closer to the door. "Which is why we're all going to walk out of here very calmly. Lady Rothschild is going to leave, and none of you are going to follow. Simple." "You can't possibly think you'll get away with this," Clara said, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "There are hundreds of witnesses. The real authorities are on their way. By the time they arrive, we'll be on a ship to France." The man smiled coldly. "Lady Rothschild has resources you can't imagine. Money buys loyalty. And exits." Isabella had regained her composure, her face settling into that familiar mask of cold calculation. "You should have stayed invisible, Clara. You should have accepted your place. Now you've made this personal." "It was always personal," Clara shot back. "You murdered people. You tried to destroy my life." Your life was already destroyed. You just didn't have the awareness to notice. Isabella's smile was venomous. A loveless marriage. A husband who barely knew your name. 7 years of being nothing. I didn't destroy anything. I just pointed out what was already broken. The words hit harder than Clara wanted to admit, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. You know what's funny? Dr. Whitley stepped forward from the crowd, his hands visible and empty. You think you're the only one who planned for contingencies. The false constable swung his weapon toward Whitley. Stay back, old man. Oh, I'm staying right here. But you might want to look at your employer. Isabella's face had gone pale. Her hand clutched at her throat, and her breathing had become labored. What did you do? She gasped. The champagne you've been drinking all evening, Whitley said calmly. I added a little something to it. Not fatal. I'm a doctor, not a murderer, but extremely unpleasant. Your heart is probably racing right now, your vision getting blurry. Hard to breathe, isn't it? You're bluffing. But Isabella's words slurred slightly, her pupils dilating. Am I? Or did you forget that I've spent months studying exactly how to mimic the symptoms you inflicted on Lord Edmund? The same digitalis you used in a carefully measured dose. Enough to make you feel like you're dying without actually killing you. Whitley's voice was ice. Ironic, isn't it? Being poisoned by your own method. The false constable looked panicked now, his weapon swinging between Whitley and the crowd. What did you give her? Fix it. There's nothing to fix. It will wear off in a few hours. But she's going to feel extremely ill for a while. Whitley pulled a small vial from his pocket. Unless you'd like the antidote, which I'm happy to provide to the authorities, along with Lady Rothschild. Isabella collapsed against her hired guard, gasping for breath. The weapon in his hand wavered. Think carefully, Adrian said, his voice carrying absolute authority. You can shoot your way out of here, maybe. Probably get yourself killed in the process. Or you can leave now, abandon your employer, and disappear before the real constables arrive. You won't make it 2 blocks carrying her, Clara added. Not with how sick she's about to get. And every person in this room knows your face now. Where exactly are you planning to hide? The man's eyes darted around the ballroom, calculating odds and finding them increasingly poor. Isabella was now doubled over, retching, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. This isn't over, he snarled. But Clara could hear the defeat in his voice. Lady Rothschild has friends, resources. You think one arrest will stop anything? No, Clara said calmly, but it's a start. The sound of actual constables arriving, horses, voices, the organized chaos of law enforcement echoed from outside. The false constable made his decision, shoving Isabella roughly toward Whitley and bolting for a side exit. He made it 3 steps before Lord Pemberton's massive frame blocked his path. I don't think so, lad. Pemberton's fist connected with the man's jaw in a satisfying crack, and the false constable went down hard. Real constables flooded into the ballroom, their sergeant taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. Unconscious guard on the floor, retching noblewoman being supported by a doctor, and several hundred witnesses. Your Grace, he said to Clara, I'm going to need a statement. Of course. But first, Dr. Whitley needs to treat Lady Rothschild. She's been poisoned. I poisoned her, Whitley corrected cheerfully. Non-lethally, all documented and prepared with full disclosure to your superiors. I believe you'll find the paperwork authorizing it in Detective Morrison's office. The sergeant blinked. Detective Morrison? My son, Lady Morrison said, stepping forward from the crowd. Who has been investigating Lady Rothschild for the past 3 months, ever since the Duchess came to me with evidence of multiple murders. This entire evening was a coordinated operation. Clara felt the ground shift under her feet. You knew. Darling, I've been in London society for 40 years. Did you really think I'd co-host an event this significant without knowing exactly what was happening? Beatrice joined Lady Morrison. Half the people here tonight are witnesses we needed in place. The other half are connected to families Isabella has hurt over the years. But I thought, you thought you were doing this alone? Beatrice smiled. Sweet child, the moment you started making moves against Isabella Rothschild, half of London noticed. We've been waiting years for someone brave enough to challenge her. Adrian's hand found Clara's, squeezing gently. She was trembling, Clara realized, the adrenaline finally catching up to her. So this was a trap, the sergeant said, for Lady Rothschild. For a serial murderer, Lady Morrison corrected sharply. My son can provide you with detailed evidence of at least 4 deaths directly attributable to that woman. The Duchess simply provided the opportunity to catch her. Isabella, barely conscious now, was being lifted onto a stretcher. Her eyes found Clara's, and even through the haze of poison, the hatred in them was absolute. This isn't finished, she managed to gasp. I have lawyers, money, connections. You have nothing, Clara said quietly. No husband's fortune to hide behind, no social position to protect you, no reputation to leverage, just evidence, witnesses, and the truth. As Isabella was carried away, this time with genuine constables on either side, the ballroom slowly began to buzz back to life. Shocked conversations, nervous laughter, the collective processing of trauma by people who thought themselves above such things. Clara found herself surrounded by society matrons, lords, ladies, and people she'd served tea to for 7 years who had barely noticed her existence. Duchess, that was extraordinary. Your Grace, so brave. Absolutely brilliant what you did. The praise washed over her, and Clara felt detached from it all, as if watching herself from a distance. 7 years of invisibility, and now suddenly everyone wanted to talk to her. I need air, she murmured to Adrian. He understood immediately, clearing a path through the crowd with the authority of his title. They escaped to the gardens, where the cool night air felt like salvation after the suffocating ballroom. Clara walked until she found a stone bench hidden behind a hedge, away from the lights and voices. She sat, her hands shaking now that no one was watching, the enormity of what had just happened crashing over her in waves. You're in shock, Adrian said gently, sitting beside her. I almost got everyone killed. If that man had started shooting, but he didn't, because you were smart enough to create doubt, because Whitley had a backup plan, because we worked together. Adrian took her trembling hands in his. Clara, you just took down one of the most dangerous women in England. You're allowed to feel overwhelmed. I didn't do it alone. Apparently half of London was helping without telling me. Because you inspired them to. Because you stood up first. You gave them permission to act. Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. You spent 7 years watching and learning and being invisible. And when it mattered, you used all of it. That's not weakness, that's strategy. Clara laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. Strategy. I was terrified the entire time. Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing it anyway. Adrian lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. You were magnificent. The gesture, tender and genuine, shocked Clara into stillness. Adrian, what are we doing? What do you mean? This. Us. Is this real, or is this still part of the performance? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his hand still holding hers. I don't know, he admitted. A week ago I would have said performance, strategy. But tonight, watching you face down a murderer with nothing but your courage and intelligence, Clara, I haven't been able to look away from you. That's adrenaline talking. Maybe. Or maybe it's 7 years of being blind finally ending. He shifted closer. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I've been cruel through indifference and cold through fear. But if you're willing, if you think there's any possibility, I'd like to try to be a real husband. Not the one you married. Someone better. Clara's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. I don't know if I can trust that. We've been strangers for so long. I know. Which is why I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm just asking, don't close the door completely. Give me a chance to prove that people can change. That I can change. Before Clara could respond, voices interrupted them. Eliza appeared around the hedge, her face flushed with excitement. Your Grace, you have to come see. The ledgers we found. Detective Morrison has been going through them. Isabella didn't just poison her husbands. She was running an entire operation. Blackmail, bribery, manipulation. There are names in those books that will shake London to its foundations. Names? Clara stood, her strategic mind immediately shifting into focus. Who? Members of Parliament, judges, society leaders, All of them compromised, all of them under her control. Eliza's eyes were wide. Your Grace, you didn't just catch a murderer, you exposed a network. Adrian swore softly. That's why she was so confident. She had leverage on half the powerful people in the city. Had, Clara corrected, past tense, now that evidence is in the hands of law enforcement. They returned to the ballroom to find Detective Morrison, a sharp-eyed man in his 30s, holding court with several officials. He looked up as Clara approached. Your Grace, I owe you an apology. When my mother first brought your accusations to me, I was skeptical. A duchess claiming that a wealthy widow was a serial poisoner? It sounded like society drama. But you investigated anyway. Mother can be very persuasive. And the more I dug, the more your story held up. He gestured to the ledgers spread across a table. These documents are going to destroy a lot of powerful people. Judges who took bribes to dismiss cases. Politicians who sold votes. Businessmen who built fortunes on blackmail. How did she do it? Clara asked, staring at the meticulous records. Carefully, patiently, over years. Morrison flipped through pages. She'd identify someone vulnerable, gambling debts, affairs, financial troubles. She'd offer help. And once they accepted, she owned them. Small favors at first, then larger ones, until they were completely compromised. It's brilliant, Beatrice said grimly. Horrifying but brilliant. She built a shadow empire. Which is now exposed, Morrison said. Thanks to you, Your Grace. These ledgers will take months to fully investigate, but I guarantee you, this will reshape London's power structure. The weight of it settled on Clara's shoulders. She'd wanted justice for Isabella's victims. She hadn't anticipated unraveling an entire criminal network. Will she face trial? Clara asked. Absolutely. We have multiple murder charges, the medical evidence from Dr. Whitley, the physical evidence from her townhouse, and now proof of widespread corruption and blackmail. Morrison's smile was grim. Lady Rothschild will spend the rest of her life in prison. Of that, I'm certain. And the people in those ledgers? Will face investigation. Some will be charged, others will resign quietly to avoid scandal. Either way, their power is broken. Morrison looked at Clara with something approaching respect. You've changed London, Your Grace, whether you intended to or not. Over the next few hours, statements were taken, evidence was catalogued, and the gala transformed from a social event into a crime scene. Guests were interviewed and released, most of them looking dazed by the evening's revelations. Clara found herself giving her statement to 3 different officials, walking them through everything from Eliza's first visit to the confrontation on stage. Her voice remained steady, her facts precise, but inside she felt hollowed out, exhausted beyond anything she'd experienced before. It was nearly 3 in the morning when they finally returned to Blackmore Manor. The house was quiet, staff having long since gone to bed. Clara and Adrian stood in the entrance hall, both too wired to sleep despite their exhaustion. I should check on Eliza, Clara said. Make sure she's settled. She's been through so much. Clara. Adrian caught her hand. She's fine. Mrs. Hartley has her in the guest wing with tea and blankets. You need to rest. I can't. If I stop moving, if I stop thinking, I'll... Her voice cracked. Adrian pulled her into his arms without asking permission, wrapping her in warmth and solid presence. For a moment, Clara resisted. 7 years of distance didn't disappear in a week, no matter what had happened. But then exhaustion won, and she collapsed against him, letting him support her weight. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. You're safe. It's over. Is it? Clara's voice was muffled against his chest. Isabella has lawyers, resources. What if she finds a way out? She won't. Not with this much evidence, not with this many witnesses. Adrian's arms tightened. You won, Clara. You actually won. Clara pulled back enough to look at him. We won. You stood beside me. Whitley provided evidence. Eliza risked everything. The Morrisons, Beatrice, half of London society. It wasn't just me. No, but you started it. You were the catalyst. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face. 7 years I spent thinking you were content to be invisible. Turns out you were just waiting for something worth fighting for. I was waiting for someone to notice I existed, Clara corrected quietly. I was waiting to matter. You matter. The words came out fierce, almost angry. I was too blind and too broken to see it, but you matter. You always mattered. Adrian. He kissed her. It wasn't strategic, wasn't for show, wasn't the careful cold kiss they'd exchanged at their wedding 7 years ago. This was real, desperate and genuine and full of 7 years of missed opportunities. Clara froze for a heartbeat, then kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. All her loneliness, her anger, her fear, her tentative hope, all of it channeled into this single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I know I don't deserve another chance, he said quietly. I know I have years of coldness to make up for. But if you're willing to try, if you think there's any possibility of us becoming something real, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be the husband you deserved from the beginning. Clara closed her eyes, feeling tears she'd been holding back all evening finally escape. I don't know if I can trust this. Trust you. What if it's just gratitude or guilt or adrenaline? Then we take it slow. We start over. We actually get to know each other. Adrian's thumb wiped away her tears. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. A chance, Clara repeated, testing the word. To what? Build something from ruins? To build something from honesty. We know the worst of each other now. We've seen each other scared and desperate and fighting for survival. That's a better foundation than most marriages start with. Clara laughed despite herself. That's a depressingly low bar. And yet here we are, having cleared it. Adrian managed a slight smile. What do you say, Duchess? Think we can figure out how to be married for real? Clara thought about 7 years of silence. About the woman she'd been when she married him, hopeful and naive and so desperately wanting to be loved. About the woman she'd become, harder, smarter, more dangerous than anyone expected. I say we try, she finally answered. But Adrian, I'm not the same person you married. I'm not going back to being invisible and accommodating. I wouldn't want you to. I want this version, the one who faces down murderers and organizes social warfare and refuses to accept unacceptable situations. She's terrifying. She's magnificent. Adrian kissed her again, softer this time. And she's my wife, if she'll have me. The next morning, London awoke to scandal. The newspapers were full of it, society pages and front-page news blending together in a frenzy of revelation. Lady Rothschild's arrest, the exposure of the blackmail network, names being named, reputations being destroyed, and through it all, one consistent thread. The Duchess of Blackmore. The woman who had been invisible for 7 years. The ghost Duchess, who had turned out to be anything but powerless. Clara read the papers over breakfast, Adrian beside her, actually beside her, not at opposite ends of a too long table. It felt strange, new, possibly terrifying. The Duchess who changed everything, she read aloud from the Times headline. That's dramatic. That's accurate, Adrian countered. Look at the list of resignations already. 3 members of Parliament, 2 judges, a dozen businessmen. They're running because they're guilty. They're running because you exposed them. Whether intentionally or not, you just cleaned house on London's corruption. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Hartley entered with a silver tray piled with calling cards and letters. Your Grace, you have visitors, quite a lot of them. Lady Morrison, Lady Ashford, Lady Pemberton, and approximately 20 others. They're waiting in the drawing rooms. Clara looked at the mountain of cards, overwhelmed. All of them? All of them, and more arriving by the minute. Mrs. Hartley's expression was carefully neutral, but Clara detected a hint of satisfaction. It seems you've become quite popular, Your Grace. After Mrs. Hartley left, Clara stared at the cards, feeling something like panic rising. I don't know how to be popular. I've spent 7 years perfecting invisibility. Then don't be popular. Be yourself. Adrian stood, offering his hand. Be the woman who stood on a stage and exposed a murderer. Be the woman who organized an entire city against corruption. Be the woman who scared me half to death last night with her courage. That woman has no idea what she's doing. Neither does anyone else. We're all just pretending. Adrian pulled her to her feet. Come on, Let's go face your admirers, together. The drawing rooms were packed. Women Clara had served tea to for 7 years, who had barely acknowledged her existence, now hung on her every word. They wanted to know everything: how she'd discovered Isabella's crimes, how she'd planned the exposure, how she'd found the courage to act. Clara told the story carefully, giving credit where it was due. To Eliza's bravery, to Whitley's evidence, to the Morrisons' investigation. But the women didn't want to hear about supporting players. They wanted to hear about her. "You were invisible for so long," Lady Pemberton said. "How did you bear it?" "I didn't have a choice," Clara said honestly. "Or I thought I didn't. Turns out, we always have choices. I just wasn't brave enough to make difficult ones until I had no other option." "You've inspired us," Beatrice said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "Half the women in this room have spent years accepting unacceptable situations because they thought they had no power. You proved them wrong." "I proved we all have more power than we think," Clara corrected, "but it requires risk, action, being willing to be seen." As the morning wore on and visitors continued to arrive, Clara felt something shift inside herself. Not quite comfortable. She wasn't sure she'd ever be fully comfortable with attention, but acceptance. Understanding that invisibility had been a choice, however unconscious, and she was choosing differently now. By afternoon, when the last visitor finally left, Clara collapsed onto a sofa in exhausted relief. "That was worse than facing Isabella," she said to the ceiling. Adrian laughed, sitting beside her. "That was London society embracing you. Get used to it. You're not invisible anymore." "I noticed." Clara turned her head to look at him. "Adrian, what happens now? With us, I mean. Do we just continue? Pretend the last 7 years didn't happen?" "No. We acknowledge they happened. We admit they were awful and wrong and my fault." Adrian's expression was serious. "Then we decide who we want to be going forward. Together. And if we can't figure that out, then we keep trying until we do." He took her hand, the gesture becoming familiar. "Clara, I spent 7 years refusing to see you because I was afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of wanting something and losing it. Afraid of everything except loneliness, which I thought was safer than risk." "Was it?" "No, it was just slower poison." Adrian lifted her hand to his lips. "You're the bravest person I know. You faced a murderer, exposed corruption, and changed London. The least I can do is face my own fear and try to be worthy of you." Clara felt tears threatening again. "That's really unfair. I'm too exhausted for emotional conversations." "Then rest. We have time now. All the time we need." That evening, as London continued to buzz with scandal and revelation, Clara stood at her bedroom window looking out at the darkened grounds. Behind her, her chambers, which had been her private refuge for 7 years, felt different now. Less like a prison of loneliness and more like a space she'd simply outgrown. A knock startled her. Adrian stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Is this all right? I can go if—" "Stay," Clara said, surprising herself. "Just stay. We don't have to do anything or be anything. Just don't leave me alone tonight." Adrian crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the darkness give way to scattered lamplight from the city beyond. "We did it," Clara said quietly. "You did it," Adrian corrected. "We did it," Clara insisted. "Together." And for the first time in 7 years, the word felt true. For the first time in 7 years, Clara woke in her chambers and didn't feel alone. Adrian had stayed through the night, not in her bed, but in the chair by the fireplace, as if keeping watch. The vulnerability of that gesture, the fact that he'd chosen proximity over possession, touched something deep inside her that she'd thought long dead. She watched him sleep for a moment, this man who had been a stranger wearing a husband's title for so long. His face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger, less haunted. The hard lines that grief and betrayal had carved into his features seemed softer somehow. As if sensing her attention, his eyes opened. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other across the room, no masks, no roles, just two people trying to figure out what they could build from the ruins of what they'd been. "Good morning," Adrian said quietly. Good morning. Clara sat up, pulling her robe tighter. You didn't have to stay. I know. I wanted to. He stood, stretching out the stiffness from sleeping in a chair. How are you feeling? Like I fought a war and won, but now have to deal with the aftermath. Clara moved to the window, watching the city wake. The newspapers will be worse today, won't they? Probably. More names exposed, more scandals revealed, more people demanding to know how one Duchess managed to upend London's power structure. Adrian joined her at the window. But that's tomorrow's problem. Today, we have a different challenge. Which is? Isabella's trial is being fast-tracked. The prosecutor wants to meet with us this afternoon to prepare testimony. Clara's stomach clenched. Already? With this much evidence and this many connected crimes, they want to move quickly before anyone has time to interfere or disappear. Adrian's hand found hers. You'll have to testify. Face her again in court. Relive everything. I know. Clara squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the contact. I can do it. I have to. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Hartley entered with the morning papers and a concerned expression. Your Grace, I thought you should see these before anyone else arrives. The headlines were worse than Clara had anticipated, but it wasn't the scandal or the exposés that made her blood run cold. It was the editorial in the society section of the most influential paper, written by someone identified only as a friend of justice. The piece was a vicious attack on Clara herself, questioning her motives, suggesting the entire Isabella affair was orchestrated jealousy from a scorned wife, implying that the evidence had been fabricated or manipulated. It painted Clara as a vindictive woman who had used her position to destroy a rival. This is Isabella's doing, Adrian said, his voice tight with anger. Even from custody, she's trying to discredit you. It's working. Clara pointed to the editorial's conclusion, which called for a full investigation into Clara's actions. Look at this. They're suggesting I should be charged with conspiracy and false accusation. That's ridiculous. We have evidence, witnesses, medical documentation. We have a complicated case against a wealthy woman with powerful connections. Clara set down the paper with deliberate calm. Isabella is reminding everyone that she still has weapons, that she can still hurt us even behind bars. Then we remind everyone of the truth. Adrian's jaw set with determination. The prosecutor's meeting is at 2. We'll give him everything we have and make sure the case is airtight. But as the morning progressed, it became clear that Isabella's counterattack was more sophisticated than one editorial. Lawyers began filing motions. Character witnesses for Isabella appeared in newspapers, describing her as charitable and kind. Whispers began circulating that Clara had been obsessed with Isabella for years, jealous and unstable. By noon, the tide of public opinion had shifted dangerously. They're destroying you, Eliza said, her face pale as she read through the latest newspapers. They're making you look like a vindictive madwoman. They're trying to, Clara corrected. There's a difference. But she could feel the old familiar weight settling on her shoulders, the pressure of scrutiny, the exhaustion of being seen. Part of her wanted to retreat, to go back to being invisible where it was safe. The other part, the part that had stood on a stage and exposed a murderer, refused to back down. We need to respond, Beatrice said, arriving with Lady Morrison and several other allies. This narrative can't stand unchallenged. How do we respond to lies without looking defensive? Clara asked. We don't respond to the lies. We amplify the truth. Lady Morrison pulled out a carefully prepared statement. My son has agreed to give a press conference this afternoon. As the lead detective on the case, he'll present the evidence publicly. Medical records, financial documents, witness testimony, everything that proves Isabella's guilt beyond question. And I, Dr. Whitley said, entering the room with surprising confidence for a man who had been in hiding for months, will present my findings to the medical board and the press. Let them try to discredit a respected physician with documented evidence. We're not letting you face this alone, Beatrice said firmly. Isabella thinks she can isolate you, make you look crazy and vindictive. But you have allies now, and we're not backing down. Clara felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening. For 7 years she'd been alone in this house, alone in her marriage, alone in her existence. Now, surrounded by people willing to fight for her, she understood what she'd been missing all along, community, partnership, the strength that came from being part of something larger than herself. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you." "I don't know how to—" "You don't have to thank us," Lady Morrison interrupted. "You gave us permission to stop accepting the unacceptable. This is us returning the favor." The prosecutor's office was imposing, all dark wood and legal gravity. Thomas Crawford was a sharp-eyed man in his 40s with a reputation for winning difficult cases. He listened to Clara's testimony with careful attention, occasionally making notes, never interrupting. When she finished, he sat back and studied her. "You understand that Isabella's lawyers will try to destroy you on the stand," he said bluntly. "They'll paint you as jealous, obsessed, willing to fabricate evidence to eliminate a rival." "I understand." "They'll bring up your marriage, the 7 years of distance between you and the Duke. They'll suggest you were unstable, desperate for attention, willing to create drama to make yourself relevant." "Let them try," Clara said calmly. "Every word of my testimony is true. Every piece of evidence is documented and verified. I'm not afraid of the truth." Crawford's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. "Good. Because this trial is going to be brutal. Isabella Rothschild has resources and connections. She'll use every weapon available." "So will we," Adrian said from beside Clara. "My wife has spent 7 years being underestimated. That ends now." "Your Grace, with respect, your testimony is less critical than hers," Crawford said to Adrian. "You weren't directly involved in the investigation. You didn't discover the evidence or build the case. Your primary role will be character witness for your wife." "Then that's what I'll be," Adrian replied, "and I'll make sure everyone understands exactly who Clara Whitmore is, the strongest, most courageous person I've ever known." Crawford studied them both, and Clara saw the moment his professional assessment shifted into something like respect. "All right, we go to trial in 3 days." That's unusually fast, but given the scope of the crimes and the number of connected cases, the Crown wants this resolved quickly. "Can you be ready?" "We're ready now," Clara said. The 3 days before the trial passed in a blur of preparation. Clara met with Crawford repeatedly, walking through her testimony, anticipating questions, learning to stay calm under pressure. Adrian stood beside her through all of it, a steady presence that made the impossible feel manageable. Eliza gave her own testimony to the prosecutor, detailing her years working for Isabella and the evidence she'd discovered. Dr. Whitley presented his medical findings with scientific precision. Detective Morrison compiled the documentary evidence into an overwhelming case. And through it all, Isabella's lawyers launched attack after attack in the press, character assassinations, conspiracy theories, anything to undermine the case before it reached court. On the morning of the trial, Clara dressed in navy blue, serious, authoritative, projecting competence rather than emotion. She braided her hair back severely, applied minimal cosmetics, and looked at herself in the mirror with cold assessment. This woman was not the ghost Duchess, not the invisible wife, not the accommodating society decoration. This was someone new, someone forged in conflict and tested by fire. "Ready?" Adrian appeared in her doorway, dressed in formal court attire. "As I'll ever be." The courthouse was surrounded by crowds, journalists, curious citizens, protesters both for and against Isabella. Clara and Adrian had to push through a wall of noise and questions to reach the entrance. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, standing room only, the air thick with anticipation. Isabella sat at the defense table in elegant black, looking composed and dignified, the wronged widow facing false accusations. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and Clara saw the hatred there, barely masked by Isabella's practiced calm. The judge entered, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness and intolerance for theatrical nonsense. She called the court to order with a sharp gavel strike. The Crown versus Isabella Rothschild. Multiple charges of murder, conspiracy, fraud, and blackmail. How does the defendant plead? Isabella stood gracefully. "Not guilty, Your Honor. These charges are fabrications by a jealous woman seeking to destroy me." The judge's expression didn't change. "The defendant will have opportunity to present her defense. Be seated. Prosecutor Crawford, your opening statement." Crawford stood and faced the jury with calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear is not a story of jealousy or social rivalry. It's a story of systematic murder spanning nearly a decade. Isabella Rothschild has left a trail of dead men and stolen fortunes in her wake. We will prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that she is a calculating killer who has evaded justice through wealth, manipulation, and the systematic silencing of anyone who threatened to expose her. He outlined the case methodically: the pattern of deaths, the medical evidence, the financial records, the blackmail network. By the time he finished, the courtroom was silent with horrified attention. Isabella's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Reginald Moss, stood for the defense. The prosecution would have you believe my client is some sort of criminal mastermind. The reality is far simpler. Isabella Rothschild is a woman who has been successful in life and love. She has buried 3 husbands, a tragedy, yes, but hardly evidence of murder. The prosecution's case rests entirely on the testimony of a bitter Duchess, a disgraced servant with a grudge, and a doctor who faked his own death. These are not credible witnesses. This is a conspiracy born of jealousy and sustained by circumstantial evidence. The trial proper began with Dr. Whitley's testimony. He presented his findings with calm professionalism, explaining the digitalist poisoning in terms the jury could understand. Moss tried to discredit him, attacking his decision to fake his death, suggesting instability and unreliability. Dr. Whitley, isn't it true that you abandoned your medical practice and your patients to go into hiding? I went into hiding to avoid being murdered, Whitley replied evenly, just like the previous doctor who questioned Lady Rothschild's actions. He wasn't as fortunate. His carriage accident was very real. Speculation. Do you have proof? I have a pattern. 3 doctors who treated Lady Rothschild's husbands. 2 are dead under suspicious circumstances. I'm the 3rd. You can call that speculation. I call it survival instinct. The testimony continued through the first day. Medical experts, financial analysts, handwriting specialists authenticating the documents Eliza had found. Each witness built the case brick by brick. Clara's testimony was scheduled for the 2nd day. That night, she barely slept. Adrian stayed with her again, and sometime in the dark hours before dawn, she found herself speaking into the silence. What if I'm not enough? What if they don't believe me? Then we present more evidence, Adrian said from the chair. We keep fighting until truth wins. You have a lot of faith in truth. I have faith in you. He moved to sit beside her on the bed. Clara, you've already done the hardest part. You stood up to Isabella when everyone thought you were weak. You exposed her when everyone thought you were invisible. Tomorrow, you just tell the truth. Let them see who you really are. And who is that? Someone extraordinary who spent too long pretending to be ordinary. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness. Someone I'm proud to call my wife. When Clara took the stand the next morning, she felt strangely calm. The courtroom was packed, every eye on her, but instead of the old familiar urge to shrink and disappear, she felt solid, present, real. Crawford led her through the testimony carefully. How Eliza had come to her, what evidence they'd found, why she'd organized the gala. Clara spoke clearly, precisely, leaving no room for ambiguity. Then Moss stood for cross-examination, and the real battle began. Duchess Blackmore, how long have you been married to Duke Adrian Blackmore? 7 years? And in those 7 years, would you describe your marriage as happy? Crawford objected. Relevance? I'm establishing the witness's state of mind and potential motives, Your Honor. The judge allowed it. Clara took a breath. Our marriage was not what I hoped it would be, she said honestly. We were distant, cold, more strangers than partners. And this distance, it began when Duke Blackmore's previous engagement to Isabella Rothschild ended, didn't it? His engagement ended before we married, yes. So you married a man who was heartbroken over another woman, a woman he had loved deeply. How did that make you feel? Objection, Crawford said sharply. The witness's feelings are not on trial here. Withdrawn, Moss smiled, knowing the damage was done. Duchess, when did you first become aware of Lady Rothschild's return to London? 3 weeks before the masquerade. And what was your immediate reaction? Clara met his eyes directly. Fear that my already fragile marriage would collapse completely. Fear. Jealousy, perhaps? Yes, jealousy. I was jealous of a woman my husband had loved when he barely acknowledged I existed. Clara felt the courtroom lean forward. But that jealousy didn't make me fabricate evidence. It made me vulnerable to approach when Eliza brought information about Isabella's crimes. Conveniently, this approach happened just after Lady Rothschild returned. Conveniently for justice, yes. Eliza had been trying to find someone who would listen to her for months. She came to me because she thought, correctly, that I had motivation to investigate. Moss paced, building to his attack. Duchess, isn't it true that you've spent 7 years being invisible in London society? That people barely knew your name? That you were, by all accounts, insignificant? The word landed like a slap. Clara saw several jurors wince, but she didn't flinch. Yes, she said calmly. I was invisible. Insignificant. Overlooked and underestimated by everyone, including my husband. So when Isabella Rothschild returned, beautiful, wealthy, accomplished, the woman your husband had loved, you saw an opportunity. Not for justice, but for revenge. For attention. For finally mattering. No, Clara's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. I saw an opportunity to stop a murderer. Everything else was secondary. Or everything else was primary, and the murder accusations were justification. Moss leaned on the witness box. Duchess, you've admitted you were jealous. You've admitted your marriage was failing. You've admitted you felt insignificant. Isn't it possible, just possible, that you latched onto wild accusations from a disgraced servant because it gave you a way to remove your rival? If I wanted to remove a rival through lies, I could have done it quietly, Clara said. Rumors, whispers, the kind of social destruction that happens in drawing rooms every day. Instead, I involved law enforcement. I gathered documented evidence. I risked everything on the truth being provable. Does that sound like the actions of someone fabricating accusations? It sounds like the actions of someone who got very lucky with coincidental evidence. Or, Clara said, her voice hardening, it sounds like the actions of someone who spent 7 years watching and learning how to build an unassailable case. I may have been invisible, Mr. Moss, but I wasn't stupid. And I certainly wasn't reckless enough to accuse someone of murder without being absolutely certain I could prove it. The cross-examination continued for another hour, Moss attacking from every angle. But Clara held firm, refusing to be rattled, answering each question with calm precision. When she finally stepped down, Crawford gave her a small nod of approval. She'd done well. The trial continued through the week. Eliza testified about her years with Isabella, presenting the journals and records she'd kept. Financial experts traced money through offshore accounts. Investigators presented evidence of the blackmail network. And finally, Crawford called Adrian to the stand. The questioning was brief, establishing Adrian's character, his relationship with Clara, his knowledge of the events, but when Moss stood for cross-examination, he went directly for the heart. Duke Blackmore, you were engaged to Isabella Thornwood 8 years ago, correct? Yes. You loved her? Adrian's jaw tightened. I believed I did. And when she left you, it devastated you, broke you, some might say. It hurt deeply, yes. So deeply that you married a woman you didn't love just to prove you'd moved on. Married Clara Whitmore and then proceeded to ignore her for 7 years. Objection! Crawford was on his feet. Argumentative. Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Moss. Duke Blackmore, would you say your treatment of your wife over the past 7 years was kind? Adrian looked directly at the jury. No, it was cruel, thoughtless, unforgivable. I treated Clara like furniture, present but irrelevant. I was so afraid of being hurt again that I refused to see the extraordinary woman right in front of me. And now, suddenly, you claim to value her, respect her. Isn't it convenient that this transformation occurred exactly when your wife needed your support against the woman who broke your heart? There's nothing convenient about finally seeing what I should have seen years ago, Adrian said firmly. Yes, this crisis forced me to look at Clara, really look at her. And what I saw was someone with more courage, intelligence, and strength than I ever possessed. Someone who didn't let 7 years of being invisible break her. Someone who fought for justice even when it put her in danger. He paused. I was a coward who hid from life because I was afraid. Clara is a warrior who faces threats head on. If you're asking whether I finally respect my wife, the answer is absolutely yes. I should have respected her from the beginning. The courtroom was silent. Even Moss seemed momentarily at a loss for words. No further questions, he finally said. On the final day of testimony, Crawford called Isabella herself to the stand. She moved with elegant confidence, wearing pale gray that made her look innocent and wronged. Her testimony was a masterpiece of manipulation, tears at the right moments, dignified sorrow, wounded confusion at these terrible accusations. She painted herself as a woman who had loved and lost repeatedly, who had tried to build a new life only to be destroyed by a jealous rival. "I returned to London to start over," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I certainly never killed anyone. These accusations are madness born of a troubled woman's imagination." Crawford's cross-examination was brutal and methodical. He walked her through every inconsistency, every financial record that didn't match her story, every piece of evidence that contradicted her claims. "Lady Rothschild, this receipt shows a purchase of digitalis from an apothecary under a false name. The handwriting has been verified as yours. How do you explain that?" "I don't know. Perhaps it's forged. This journal details your plans for Lord Edmund's death, in your handwriting, forged as well." "I never kept such a journal." "These witnesses place you at locations buying various compounds on dates matching your husband's symptoms. All lying. Clearly. So everyone is lying except you. The doctors, the investigators, the witnesses, the handwriting experts, the financial analysts, all of them are part of a massive conspiracy orchestrated by a duchess you claim is insignificant?" Isabella's composure finally cracked. "She's not insignificant. She's vindictive and clever, and she's manipulated all of you." "Or," Crawford said quietly, "you're exactly what the evidence shows you to be, a calculating killer who has finally been caught." The closing arguments were powerful on both sides. Moss painted Clara as an obsessed, jealous woman who had orchestrated an elaborate frame. Crawford painted Isabella as a predator who had evaded justice for years through wealth and manipulation. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Clara spent those days in a haze of anxiety and exhaustion. Adrian stayed close, providing comfort through presence. Beatrice and the others visited regularly, offering support, but nothing could ease the waiting. When the jury finally returned, the courtroom packed to capacity, Clara felt her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must hear it. The foreman stood. "On the charge of murder in the first degree of Lord Edmund Rothschild, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel struck repeatedly, demanding order. "On the charges of murder in the deaths of Lord Hastings and Lord Richard Pemberton, we find the defendant guilty. On the charges of conspiracy, fraud, and blackmail, we find the defendant guilty." Isabella's face had gone white. Her lawyer was already standing, calling for appeals, but the damage was done. The judge spoke over the noise. "Isabella Rothschild, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of murder and conspiracy. You will be remanded to custody pending sentencing. Given the severity and premeditated nature of these crimes, I am recommending the maximum sentence allowed by law. This court is adjourned." As constables, real ones this time, led Isabella away, she turned and looked directly at Clara. The hatred in her eyes was absolute, but there was something else too. Defeat. For the first time in her life, Isabella Rothschild had lost. Outside the courthouse, Clara and Adrian were mobbed by well-wishers and journalists. Questions flew from all directions, but Clara raised her hand for silence. "I want to say something," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "This was never about me versus Isabella Rothschild. This was about justice for 4 murdered men. This was about stopping someone who thought wealth and connections put her above the law. And most importantly, this was about proving that no one, no matter how invisible or insignificant they seem, is powerless." "Duchess, how does it feel to have won?" "I didn't win," Clara corrected. "Justice won, truth won, and that's all that matters." Adrian's arm slipped around her waist. "A public claim. A declaration. My wife has shown more courage in 3 weeks than most people show in a lifetime. I'm honored to stand beside her." The words, spoken in front of hundreds of witnesses, felt like a different kind of verdict, an acknowledgement that shifted everything. 3 weeks later, Isabella was sentenced to life imprisonment. The blackmail network she'd built was systematically dismantled. Dozens of powerful people faced consequences, some legal, some social, all deserved. And Clara Whitmore, the ghost Duchess who had been invisible for 7 years, became one of the most influential women in London. She stood in the conservatory of Blackmore Manor, her favorite room, now transformed with new plants and fresh light, and considered the strange journey that had brought her here. "Penny for your thoughts?" Adrian appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. "I was thinking about how different everything is," Clara said, accepting the tea. "A month ago, I was nobody. Now people ask my opinion on social policy. Charitable organizations want my patronage. Society matrons seek my approval. How does it feel?" "Terrifying, overwhelming, and strangely right." Clara turned to face him fully. "But the biggest difference isn't the public recognition. It's this. Us." "Us," Adrian repeated, moving closer. Strange word for people who were strangers a month ago. "Are we still strangers?" "No." Adrian set down his tea and took both her hands. "Clara, I know we've been taking things slowly, rebuilding, learning who we actually are to each other, but I need you to know this isn't gratitude. This isn't guilt. This is me, finally seeing you and realizing I've been given a gift I never deserved." "Adrian, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I wasted 7 years. 7 years I could have spent knowing you, understanding you, loving you. I can't get those years back, but I can promise you the rest of my life. Not the cold, distant husband you married, not the broken man hiding from feeling, but someone who sees you, chooses you, fights beside you." Clara felt tears threatening. "That's a beautiful speech." "It's the truth." Adrian lifted her hands to his lips. "I know I need to prove it. I know words aren't enough after 7 years of silence. But if you'll let me, if you think there's any possibility, I want to spend the rest of our lives building something real." "I think," Clara said slowly, "that we've already started building. Maybe not a perfect marriage. Maybe not even a conventional one. But something honest. Something earned through fire and conflict." "Something worth fighting for?" "Something worth fighting for," Clara agreed. She pulled him closer, rising on her toes to kiss him properly. Not desperately like after the gala, but with slow certainty. "I don't need perfection, Adrian. I just need partnership, truth. Someone who sees me and doesn't look away." "Then that's what you'll have," Adrian promised against her lips. "Every day, for the rest of our lives." 6 months later, Clara stood before the newly opened women's hospital, funded by the charity gala that had exposed Isabella, bearing the names of the 4 men who had died at her hands. The building gleamed in the afternoon sun, a monument to justice and second chances. The crowd gathered for the opening was impressive. Politicians, society leaders, ordinary citizens who had followed the trial. Beatrice stood beside Clara on the platform, along with Lady Morrison, Eliza, and Dr. Whitley. "Your Grace," the hospital director said, "would you like to say a few words before we cut the ribbon?" Clara looked out at the faces, some familiar, some strange, all watching with respect that still felt new. 7 months ago, none of these people would have known her name. Now they waited for her to speak. "This hospital represents something important," Clara began, her voice steady. "It represents the idea that everyone deserves care and protection, regardless of their position in society. For too long, certain people were deemed unworthy of notice, the invisible, the insignificant, the ones society chose to overlook." She paused. "I know what that feels like. To exist in spaces where no one sees you. To speak and have your words disappear into silence. To matter so little that your pain is irrelevant." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "But invisibility doesn't mean powerlessness. Silence doesn't mean acceptance. And being overlooked doesn't mean being worthless." Clara's eyes found Adrian in the crowd, standing with quiet pride. "Sometimes the people society dismisses are the ones paying the most attention, learning the most, preparing for the moment when they'll finally be heard. This hospital will serve women who have been invisible, dismissed, overlooked, and it will tell them what someone should have told me years ago. You matter. Your health matters. Your life matters. You are seen." She cut the ribbon to thunderous applause, and as the crowd surged forward to tour the new facility, Clara felt Adrian's hand slip into hers. That was perfect, he murmured. It was true, Clara corrected. Everything else is just details. That evening, they hosted a small dinner at Blackmore Manor, not the cold, formal affairs of the past, but genuine gathering of friends. Beatrice and the Morrisons, Dr. Whitley and his family, no longer in hiding. Eliza, who had accepted a position managing Clara's charitable foundations. As Clara looked around the table, listening to laughter and conversation, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. Not just the external circumstances, the recognition, the influence, the respect, but the internal landscape. She was no longer the woman who had accepted invisibility as her fate. No longer the wife who had believed love was something that happened to other people. No longer the Duchess who had thought power meant being born with it rather than building it. She had become someone new, someone forged in conflict and proven through fire, someone who had learned that the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't being underestimated. It was underestimating yourself. After the guests left and the house settled into quiet, Clara and Adrian stood together on the terrace, looking out at the darkened gardens. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Isabella had never returned? Adrian asked. Sometimes, Clara admitted, we probably would have continued as we were, strangers in the same house, wasting our lives in careful distance. I hate that version of us. I do too, but I can't entirely regret it either. Clara turned to face him. That suffering taught me things, made me stronger, prepared me for the fight that mattered. Still, I wish I'd seen you sooner, really seen you. You see me now, that's what matters. Clara reached up to touch his face. Adrian, we can't change the past 7 years, but we have all the years ahead. What do we do with them? Build something extraordinary, Adrian said immediately. Continue the work you've started. Change things that need changing. Fight for people who need fighting for. Together. Together, Clara echoed, and the word that had once felt empty now carried the weight of real meaning. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one above the city. Somewhere out there, in a prison cell, Isabella Rothschild was living with the consequences of underestimating the wrong woman. Somewhere out there, women who had been invisible were starting to find their voices. Somewhere out there, the world was slowly becoming a place where silence didn't mean surrender. And here, on this terrace, two people who had been strangers were becoming partners. Not through romance or passion alone, but through something deeper, mutual respect, earned trust, and the kind of love that came from seeing someone at their worst and choosing them anyway. I love you, Adrian said quietly, the words surprising them both. Clara turned to look at him, searching his face in the starlight. Say that again. I love you, Clara Whitmore. Not because you're convenient or strategic or appropriate, because you're brilliant and brave and you make me want to be better than I am. He pulled her closer. I spent 7 years afraid to feel anything. I'm not afraid anymore. I love you too, Clara said, and realized it was true. Not the desperate, hopeful love of her 19-year-old self who had married a stranger, but something harder, earned through conflict and proven through trial. I love the man you've become, the one who learned to see, the one who stands beside me instead of above or behind. They kissed under the emerging stars, and it felt like sealing a promise. Not the hollow vows they'd spoken 7 years ago, but something real and tested and true. The ghost Duchess was gone. In her place stood Clara Whitmore, Duchess of Blackmore, a woman who had learned that invisibility could be a weapon, that silence could be strategy, and that the most dangerous thing in the world was someone who looked powerless but had been preparing for battle all along. She had survived 7 years of loneliness, exposed a murderer, dismantled a criminal network, changed London's power structure, and in the process, she had found something she'd stopped believing was possible. She had found herself. And she had found love, not the fairy tale kind that happened to passive princesses waiting for rescue, but the kind that was built through fire and forged through conflict. The kind where two broken people chose to heal together and build something stronger than what they'd broken. As the night deepened and the city lights sparkled below them, Clara leaned against her husband, her real husband, finally, and smiled. She had started this journey as no one, A ghost. An afterthought. She had become someone who mattered, not because society said so, but because she had claimed her own power and used it to change the world. And that, Clara thought as Adrian's arms tightened around her, was the only victory that had ever really mattered. The invisible Duchess had become the most dangerous woman in London, and she was just getting started.